We are going to be starting our read today with a harmonic energy update. We're going to be drawing the first two cards in our 5-card spread for today. First two cards we are starting our day off with today are the High Priestess in its reversal in combination with our Queen of Cups in its upright. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing in these cards, specifically in relationality to how we are effectively experiencing this energy. So, one of the things that we're identifying right now is working through the observation of the emotions. Now, one of the things I was trying to articulate before we started today's podcast is we're coming out of an eclipse cycle that was very unique because it was building in to a sense of healthy balance, right? The observation of being able to recognize or identify what creates that sense of energetic balance is often the state or space by which we ourselves are able to effectively navigate or articulate in the realm of our emotions. Now, the thing about it is the best way I can describe this is we're going through a very intense Pisces season. And the reason that there's that intensity in relationality to the Pisces season has to do with the fact that there's a lot of activation that's happening in Pisces as we are experiencing the energy. We've had a lot of planets that have been moving out of Pisces, which can bring up a lot of abandonment wounds or feeling very, very energetically triggered. Now, one of the things to recognize or identify in relationality to that work is the observation of identifying how we effectively feel about things. There could be a lot of wounds from the past that are potentially arising. Now, in this way, um, when we were going through the eclipse process, it might have actually felt more energetically stable. And the reason by which it may have felt more stable has to do with the fact that as we were going through that, prior to the eclipse season ending, Venus was still in Pisces. Okay, so we had Venus in Pisces before the eclipse ended, and we also had Mercury that was in retrograde. Now, this is just to show you that not that planets in retrograde aren't always necessarily bad things because the observation of going through an expansiveness process, working through the eclipse energy. But then as we're going through the eclipse energy, having a bit of the Mercury retrograde, which has a tendency of what? Slowing things down. The Mercury retrograde that we were experiencing through that eclipse was actually potentially creating a sense of balance. So what might be happening right now is as we're moving out of the eclipse, and I like to talk about this here, I'm not necessarily as stressed. I know everybody gets all up in their feels about what happens during eclipse processes. I'm not really worried so much about the eclipse process, so much as I grow concerned in terms of identifying and recognizing what happens after the eclipse process, right? What happens after we effectively work through things? Because um, there's something to be said about that proportionality or the observation about identifying or recognizing the ability to work through things that allows us to be able to identify and build into things even more. So if you're feeling like this, then I want to describe we're going through a lot of the ennui, like the afterglow of the eclipse process. And we've got we've got Venus that's moved into Aries. So that can often sometimes it often create frustration or feelings of volatility as it relates to our own progress or our own ability to effectively move through things. So just be conscientious of that. Particularly as we're going through this, because I want to describe this. with Jupiter coming out of retrograde tomorrow, right? That can sometimes create even more, right? That can sometimes feel that can create even more of that amplification. And I want to describe it. Jupiter coming out of Jupiter has been in retrograde for quite some time now. So that observation of feeling that, like I'm anticipating that it might almost feel like a bit of a full moon energy because it's working through a lot of that feeling. And the Jupiter is often, right? Jupiter is often where we hold the sense of the self or the ability to effectively communicate our needs better, right? It's a lot of that observation. Now, as this relates to the energy moving through the frequency cycles right now, we're going to talk first about the energy that's in solitude at this moment. Center card for today's spread is we have here the Three of Wands in its reversal. So let's talk a little bit about this Three of Wands energy here, because the Three of Wands energy that we're identifying is the Three of Wands energy that we're identifying is I kind of like the space by which the space by which we work through circumstances can often create a lot of those feelings of working through things we cannot energetically see or anticipate is the best way I can describe it. And the thing about that as well is when we're working through circumstances or situations by which we feel like we can't describe things. This type of energy often brings up ineffable feelings. That's the best way I can kind of put it. Working through ineffable feelings or having a hard place to put things. This is why I actually said this is why it might be good to kind of embody Capricorn energy right now, because the space by which, right? The space by which we work through a lot of emotionality can often feel like we can go through those emotional overwhelms or those feelings by which a lot of things are happening all at once. But this is the space by which a lot of that emotionality or a lot of that intensity is potentially articulated upon the full force or the full birth of our energetic meaning towards things. Because for a lot of this energy that's in solitude, that observational force that feels directive, right? There's something very important about the journey of understanding. And I like this for a lot of the energy in solitude because like, I just want to show you these cards in combination. We've got the High Priestess in its reversal. We've got the Queen of Cups in its upright. And then we've got the Three of Wands in its reversal. And so what that effectively says to us is when we are working through circumstances and situations that often create the space by which we don't feel like our emotions um are being cared for, right? It can sometimes make us feel that we are energetically out of place in our own experiences. And I feel like that's a lot of the energy, that's a lot of the work. That's a lot of the work that I see some of the energy in solitude working through, right? There's a lot of trauma surrounding. I keep on hearing, like, I almost hear somebody saying your emotions, like your emotions are not good here. And I want to describe this. This is what traumatizing relationships will create, right? The space by which emotions are the space by which our relationships are supposed to exist. And our emotions, as long as we fortify our emotions with healthy direction, then they act as guideposts in terms of identifying and recognizing the direction by which a relationship is going. And so I feel like this is either some energy that's healing in solitude with catharsis, right? And there's a lot of that catharsis that I see there. But the catharsis that we're identifying is the catharsis that articulates upon the sense or the space of having felt um like they had to hide their emotions in past relationship, right? Like that's painful. And the observation of the energy working through something and identifying that emotions, right? The place by which our emotions, the relationship should not be a place by which we hide the emotions, but where we're able to energetically reveal the emotions, then that helps us to effectively attenuate in relationality to what it is that we're working through or what it is that we're working upon. Um, and so I think I think that's very important to recognize because that is effectively either what we see is happening for the energy in solitude in terms of healing, but I also see that that's a lot of the energy that's working through something in a big way because it's the observation of the energy coming into new relationships where I keep on hearing emotionally led partnership, right? They're doing the hard work to communicate upon the emotions because I keep on seeing it's a continuation that says as long as our emotions carry healthy directions with it, then the emotions act as shield for the places that we're not supposed to be, right? And so this is a lot of I like this because I feel like that's a lot of the relationships that are they're holding those emotions carefully, right? They're almost like they're healing the relationship to their emotions in the process of coming into partnership. Now, moving deeper into the relationships, we're going to be reading into the relationships that are coming into union. And these are effectively the relationships that were coming together between the time of the Capricorn new moon that we experienced around January 18th up until September 6th of this year. So that was around the time that Uranus stationed retrograde. And these are effectively what we have been identifying as the moon partnerships. And the reason we've been identifying them as moon partnerships is they were working through a lot of the lessons of the moon card in the context of coming into partnership. These two cards to clarify here are the Lover's card in its reversal in combination with the Tower card in its reversal. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing as it relates to those energies, because for a lot of those energies, um, what we're effectively identifying has a lot to do with working into the conversation or the adaptability of being able to identify or amplify what one is working to heal. And I feel like there's something very important about those moon relationships that we're seeing because um I'm getting the sense that there's a lot of emotions that are opening up. And the one thing I want to describe with some of those moon relationships, and I think I was telling you this, a lot of those moon relationships are healing from experiences by which they could not figure out what wasn't working in past relationship, and now they're coming into the profound understanding of what was energetically missing in past relationship as it relates to connection in present partnership. And what do we effectively see is happening in those experiences, specifically and particularly? Um, a lot of that work that we're identifying there um, is effectively the understanding. And I keep on seeing this. These are relationships by which in the past, they're very, very purpose driven. These relationships, these individuals in these relationships, they carry their purpose with a sense by which it feels like it's broken past partnership, right? And I keep on seeing the modality by which relationships were experienced, by which somebody started talking about the purpose almost as in like almost like a third person, like almost like third party energy, and another person saying like my purpose is not third party, it's part and parcel is what I keep on getting, right? Somebody saying my purpose is not third party, it's part and parcel. These are relationships that are finally in connection with someone that gets that. And that's why there's a lot of emotionality that's coming up in those experiences, because these are the relationships that are recognizing that if there were situations by which they move towards where the desire, the purpose by which another person held was the reason another person aspired to move towards them, but then in the same direction, that same opposition or that same modality of feeling created the space by which, right? It created the space by which um, that same energy then said that that was the thing that was breaking the relationship. These are relationships that are recognizing that they're healing, right? They're healing from integrity wounds, right? That the problem was never the purpose, but the lack of integrity in relationality to, right? In relationality to how the other person held or carried their sense of purpose. So I keep on getting it's an emotional time, right? The relationships feel fortified, but they're also feeling very volatile potentially as it relates to past experiences that they feel like they'd moved on, potentially felt like they'd moved on from, but feel like they're coming back towards them with the understanding through the clarity and optics of what they're currently finding in partnership. So there's a lot happening there. And I see like the energy is just kind of taking the emotions as they arrive. Now, this brings us to the energy that is deep within divine union. And these are the temperance relationships. And we're identifying the temperance relationships as the relationships or the partnerships that were coming together between the time of September 6th up until, which was around the time that we had Uranus go into retrograde, up until the solstice period that we experienced this summer. Clarification between the High Priestess and its reversal and the Queen of Cups. One card to clarify, please. Darn that two, man. Here's the thing about it. A two of wands in its reversal with a three of wands in its reversal, really, it can really get to the self. And I want to point this out. The thing that we're identifying that's happening here, particularly and especially as it relates to those temperance relationships, is I keep on getting it's the observation of I feel like I feel like a lot of this energy that is a lot of this energy that is deep within like the deep within divine union right now is working on I keep on getting it's like it's a lot of that like there's like a wait a minute kind of energy there, right? There's a healthy there's a healthy resistance to things, right? And I think that that's interesting because um that healthy resistance that we build into things is the healthy resistance that we build into things is effectively how we articulate or how we like how we calibrate. And I keep on hearing healthy resistance is calibration in the best way possible because it's working through something. It's working through something in an attenuated way by which one is able to articulate upon how one feels, but also being very, I keep on saying, but also being very firm, right? And I feel like that's what's coming through with a lot of that temperance energy, which is the articulation of saying compassion comes in many different forms, right? And that's what's hard about it because, and I want to point this out. Um, the state by which, how do I describe this? Because it's most difficult for me to read right now for the energy deep within divine union, and the best way I can describe it is when we have compassion for each other, right? We're protective of one another, right? Which it's the observation, like you'll often notice this, right? The observation of the demands outside the self that are not being navigated empathically. And you'll often, and I keep on hearing this, right? Like it's interesting because it has something to do with the word, like with the word selfish is what's coming through. Because you can't articulate the word selfish without first articulating what one is asking for. Right? You'll often notice that we throw the word, we throw, you'll often hear the word selfish that's thrown a lot around a lot. But when you utilize the word selfish, you have to get introspective, right? When another person uses the word selfish, you have to become energetic detective to a certain extent, because often it's the identification in what another was expecting, right? Like selfish is only equal to expectation. And often, right, you'll notice that the energy throwing the word selfish around. You ever notice? Because, and we've talked about this. We're actually reading a lot about this when we were doing the non-binary reading a few days, like weeks ago, right? That what often happens, the sound you will literally hear, right? The sound that you will literally hear as you're moving away from a traumatizing situation is that your healing journey is selfish, right? Right? You're being very selfish right now. It's like, yeah, you hear that word a lot, right? Because, um, you know, selfless, selfless and selfish are very close together. And when another person, right? And I keep on seeing, we shouldn't have to be, we aren't selfless for each other, right? That everything we do should be heavily centered in the self in the best way possible, right? Which means, right, we don't ask each other to do something that causes each other energetic pain, right? It's the observation of being able to navigate things in proportional ways that help us to identify and recognize what feels stabilizing. So I see that for a lot of the energy facilitating upon that work, that observation, right? I keep on hearing the difference between attenuating between, right? The attenuating towards, often when someone's saying that you're being selfish, that they're often saying you're not being selfless enough, right? Healthy compassion is not the space by which one has to abandon the self, right? It's a space by which one steps even more into the self as one does something, right? And so I think that it's interesting that that's coming through for a lot of the energy that's deep within divine union, because it's the observation of what it feels like to be stable in that way, right? It's the observation of being able to recognize and identify the shape of that work. Now, continuing to get clarification between our Queen of Cups and the Three of Wands in its reversal. Can I get one card to clarify, please? Clarification coming through right now, and we're moving back towards the world partnerships. And so the world, you know, one of the things that we see with a lot of the world relationships, um, has to do with, and I wanted to, it's interesting too. And the reason we're identifying the energy that's currently moving into relationship, working through world issues, is because these are the focal points of a lot of the attenuation that we see with this card. Um, the world relationship, or the world card, is often a card that navigates healthy expansion of the self, right? It's building into it, it's like the world card is an expansion card. And when we're working into the energetic expansiveness of the self, it's often articulated or identified in relationality to not only how we're trying to do something, but the way that we energetically, the way that we often, and I want to just describe, I feel like this is the most important thing to identify. The hardest thing about finding one's space is often having to go through the journey of feeling out of place, right? And it's a shame that it's a shame, right? It's frustrating that we have to go through that. But this is why being able to feel reasonable, or in the space by which we care about the self, that we often find what we're energetically looking for, because it's the difference between fitting in and fitting out is what I keep on getting. And that's what I'm effectively seeing that's happening in some of these relationships, right? Like, I literally hear that the world relationships are having conversations about the difference between fitting in and fitting out. Right? And what does that effectively mean? Right? When you're worried about fitting in, right, then often it's a space by which you're saying, like, what do I have to change about the self in order to effectively fit in more? And the thing is, there's no room in the crowded space of fitting in. Right? Imagine a space by which everybody is worried about fitting in. And so they're all like, you're just making yourself smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And so everybody's there trying to fit in, and it feels, right, it feels awful crowded in there, right? It's the space by which we work towards things. And when we're fitting out, right? When we're fitting out, we expand more. We like when we're fitting out, when we're fitting out, then it's like, it's okay. Like, sometimes we're in energetic alignment with others, and sometimes we're not. And that's okay, because we recognize and identify that the way that we think about things is beautiful. And that observation, right? The ability of effectively recognizing or feeling that attenuation point, right? Like that modality by which we work through, right? When we work through the possibility or the profound beauty of our differences, like what happens there? We find a celebration point. And that's what I keep on seeing, right? The fitting out point is the celebration of differences, right? It's the modality by which we recognize and we rejoice in those qualities. So I feel like there's something really beautiful about that, because I almost see some of these relationships, either these are energies that, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some energy in solitude right now that feels somewhat out of place. But that's because they're embracing, right? They're embracing the quality of their own uniqueness. And at the same time, I see that some of those relationships, right? Some of those relationships that are coming together at this time, they're talking, right? They may even be talking about the fact that they're healing from relationships. And this is a hard part. When we try to conform, it feels like we perform, right? When we try to conform, it feels like we perform. So I like this because it's almost the energy taking accountability for the modality by which they may have felt, right? They may be articulating upon a relationship in the past by which and this is why we have to be conscientious. The space by which we long to be in relationships should be longing for the space by which we feel like we are home, not the space by which we feel like we want to like do everything possible to be in connection with another person. Because when that happens, what happens, right? The desire to, this is why it's so unhealthy to look at each other as possessions, right? Even the context, even the context, and we have to kind of arrive to this point. And I know nobody wants to have this conversation, but the identification point that there is a person for you is by its very nature a possessive and egotistical quality or characteristic because it's looking towards outside energy as possession. And we are not each other's possessions. We're each other's gifts. And when we recognize and identify the gift that we are when we arrive to each other, and this is what I effectively see a lot of the energy in solitude doing, then it's the observation of not building into the pathwork of looking for someone. It's looking for the self. Look for the self, right? This is the energy that says if I want to find the person that's for me, I better get really comfortable with the person that's here. Because the more comfortable I am with the person that's here will help me find the person that loves this person. Because you can't find someone that loves this person if you're not in the business of loving the self at every given moment, right? And it's the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing. It's really hard. I know. I'm not saying it's easy, but this is the energy. Like, look at the energy in solitude right now, right? They're working through that energetic journey, right? They're working through that energetic journey, and it's a little bit, right? A little bit every day, a little bit every day, right? Now let's move back into those moon relationships. Clarification between the 3 of wands in combination with the Lover's card in its reversal. Can I get one card to clarify, please? Clarification coming through right now with our Strength card in its upright. So what are we seeing with the Strength card in its upright? Um, the Strength card in its upright, and I got to describe this. These moon relationships right now. The thing about it is, and I just want to describe. I feel like they're going through a very, they're very very happy right now in relationship, right? I literally see situations and circumstances by way of identifying and working through something. And I keep on getting that there's something very significant. There's something very significant um, about those strength relationships because this is why I see like this is the energy it's saying like I can see a lot of energy right now that may be going through a moment by which they're saying, "How are you feeling?" And they're saying, "I'm overjoyed. I'm overjoyed and I'm filled with rage." Is what I keep on hearing. It's literally they're going through an expansive process, and the expansion that they're going through is feeling simultaneously overjoyed and filled with rage. But why do we see that they're potentially feeling overjoyed and filled with rage? Because they found, right? I keep on saying they found a relationship, right? These moon relationships have found a relationship by which they've finally experienced true love. It's the true love by which the energy that they're in relationship with does not perceive their purpose as third party, right? And the observation that that is happening is bringing a lot of energetic feelings up, potentially. right? And that observation of feeling the alignment into a relationship by which it's not like someone is as protective of, right? They're as protective of their purpose as they are their own. They're recognizing for the first time that a lot of those experiences in the past were actually them continually having wounds of integrity occurring, right? And the wounds of integrity, what is an integrity wound? An integrity wound, when we have integrity, our yeses stay yeses and our nos stay nos, right? We stay consistent. So the ability of potentially having to heal from relationships by which another person articulated that they were fine, that they were fine with another person's purpose, but then somehow, literally, I see this energy going, yeah, the energy said that they were fine with my purpose, and then suddenly my purpose was the reason that they weren't fine, that the purpose was getting in the way of the partnership, right? This is a lot of the energy that's saying when you're in the right relationship, you can have both, right? The relationship you can hold both with, you can have both in both hands. You can have purpose and partnership so long, right? So long as you're mutually invested upon that. So we see that that's a lot of the relationships that are working through that, but there's a lot of feelings that are coming up because they're observing something from the past that they couldn't see before. Temperance relationships, Lover's card and the Tower card in its reversal is the Ace of Wands. Um, you know, I don't know, there's something to be said, and I gotta point this out. Um, I feel like it's interesting, because something that I'm observing in relationality to, like, in relationality to something that we're seeing that we're working through in relationality to energy deep within divine union is, there's something about navigating the space, like, the space of joy is what I keep on getting. And the thing about it is, and I like to point this out, um, there there's there's something very intriguing about the ability. I keep on hearing it's the conversation that we navigate as it relates to, finding joy in things. And I like to point this out, and it's almost saying to me, there's something very beautiful there in terms of working through, um, what we identify as, like, the word I keep on hearing is surprise. But, like, the thing I keep on getting with, and I wanna point this out, and this is the saddest thing about it, right? I feel like there's some energy right now in divine union that is healing their relationship, um, to surprise, right? And this is the hardest thing that happens, with trauma, right? Because when we navigate trauma, you'll often notice that energy that's navigated deep trauma does not like surprises, right? Like, there's pain there because it's almost like the space by which another person identifies that there's like it's the work by which another person has hurt them, or the context by which another person has wounded them in the space of effectively arriving to something, and something that I see that's happening there is, um there's something about working through, the gentleness of delight, and a lot of that work that we see that is being attenuated there, um, like, has to do with, like, I keep on hearing the longing for a delightful surprise, right? Like, the gift that we often try to build into for each other. And it's hard, right? Because it often works to the space by which it often feels like, like, and I like to point this out, like joy is the balm of dread, right? Like when we're working through circumstances, then the joy we create is the gift that we bring forth to each other. And we do that, right? And I keep wondering, we find the joy for one another at every moment because it's observing or identifying um, like how we effectively navigate or recognize that. So I see that for a lot of the energy working through things right now, it's the identification of effectively trying to arrive to points of joy. And even in the modality by which one is working towards that joy, right? It's the space by which I keep wondering, it's the space by which we let go, right? We let go of the need of feeling like we perpetually have to overcorrect or the space by which we work through our own feeling of perfectitude, right? Because um, like trauma often tries to create the falsehood, right? Like this is what happens with trauma. Trauma comes into the space of trying to create control and saying if you were perfect, this wouldn't be happening, right? Like that is the lie that trauma often likes to dictate, right? Like if you were perfect, this wouldn't be happening. But the modality by which we are effectively able to navigate and recognize how we effectively help each other is the observation of being able to effectively um, perpetually give each other those moments of shared love, right? It's the equal care that we bring into things that fortifies upon our own determination. And so I feel like there's a lot of that there. And something about that force of effort or something about that observation of the state by which we articulate it. I just keep on seeing it's beautiful and it's profound, but it's also I keep on hearing it's also really difficult because so much of that work that we see is amplified by how we try to do something or work through something as well as we possibly can. Now, continuing to get clarification between our Two of Wands and its reversal and the World card in its reversal. Can I get one card to clarify, please? Clarification coming through right now with our Nine of Pentacles in its reversal. And so what we effectively see with the Nine of Pentacles in its reversal is the identification point of and this is moving us back to the energy that's in solitude. Um, the observation or the understanding that how we effectively articulate and identify our own uncertainty is often fortified by the space by which we move towards meaning. And so I think that this is really beautiful because what we're effectively identifying for a lot of the energy that's in solitude right now is working through, I feel like it's a conversation about working through situations or circumstances by which they themselves have felt energetically out of place, or the modality by which they effectively operate or navigate to try to do something in a way that they haven't done it before. And so I want to show you the cards that we're effectively seeing for a lot of those energies that are building into those relationships at this time. Because for a lot of those situations or circumstances, I simply see that these are the relationships by which they're saying that they're doing something that they've never done before. And what they're doing what that they've never done before is they're being honest about their emotions, right? And that's the space by which I keep on seeing like they're going through the same journey that say if one is being honest about their emotions, right? As long as your emotions have healthy directions attached to them, then the emotions are the highest form of protection. Because if you're being energetically honest, right? And another person is reactive to that, well, that's informative. That's information. That's a good thing to know, right? Rather than building into, right? We should never go into spaces by which we feel that we have to curtail our emotions about things, right? And that doesn't mean that we have to be emotional, right? Because our emotions give us directions. And the ability to articulate upon the emotions is how we effectively do something even greater. And so, for a lot of that energy, doing that work, articulating upon those journeys, and not just articulating upon those journeys, but being able to amplify and articulate the full breadth by which they themselves feel profoundly, um, deeply, right? These are the relationships that are working to heal from relationships by which it didn't feel like there was room for their emotions. Now, continuing to get clarification between the World card in its reversal and the Strength card in its upright, and this is moving us to those relationships that are coming into union right now. Center card for today's spread, we have here the King of Cups in its reversal. So, what are we effectively seeing with that King of Cups energy in its reversal? We've got a lot of that energy there that's effectively, and I want to describe this, and this is what we talk about. Like, a lot of what we're experiencing with this Pisces season is working through, right? Working through the emotionality that sometimes feels overwhelming, right? Often we're going through Pisces season, and I want to describe this too because we're moving towards a new moon that is going to feel very similar to a full moon because it's a double Pisces moon, right? It's a Pisces new moon in Pisces season. So it's a lot of emotions, but then with the new moon energy, so it's like the emotional cleansing of the emotions, right? The emotions that effectively allow the context of being able to purify things or the space by which we're able to effectively articulate in our emotions in ways that feel energetically profound. So I feel like there's something very beautiful about a lot of that work because I just keep on seeing that there's something very it's a very expositive moon, right? It's a very creative moon. Of Pisces new moon, a double Pisces new moon in Pisces season can feel incredibly inspired and creative. So I feel like it's the space by which we allow that to move us into positive places, not negative ones. And you'll often notice this, right? Because when we have a lot of emotions, but we're too deep in our ego, then we often feel like we have to that others are responsible for our emotions, right? We try to energetically hand them off to each other, right? They're like, these are um like these are your emotions. Here, you take you know what I mean? Like you take them. But the space by which we effectively articulate upon them is the space by which we're able to effectively truly amplify how we energetically feel about them. And I wanna point this out, like, especially with a lot of the energy that we're seeing here, I think that this is very healing. Like, I keep on getting for a lot of those moon relationships, they're going through a very healing season. But the healing that's coming through has to do with an emotional, like, overflow, and the overflow that's happening is as a direct result in being able to find something in partnership that is recontextualizing the experience of the past in a profound way. So there's a lot of feelings there, and I feel like a lot of that emotionality is potentially, like, even being emotional with counterpart and counterpart being like, "Is everything okay?" Being like, "Yes, what I'm feeling right now has nothing to do with you, has everything to do with the observation that I've been carrying an integrity wound this whole time, right? That they had experienced an integrity wound. Now, continuing for the energy deep within divine union, we got the strength card and the ace of wands. Can I get one card to clarify, please? Clarification coming through right now with the 9 of swords in its upright. And the 9, I gotta describe this. A lot of this energy that is deep within divine union right now, I keep on seeing it's trying to find a place it's trying to find a place to put complicated feelings, is what I keep on getting. And I wanna describe this. Um, the word that keeps on coming through when I'm reading right now for the energy deep within divine union is working through others' presumptions, right? And what do I mean by working through others' presumptions? Um, Trauma tries to put words in our mouth, right? Trauma tries to put words in our mouth, which is the observation of saying one thing and another person contextualizing something in an entirely different way. We've all experienced trauma like that, right? The modality by which we articulate and amplify, right? Like it's a lot of that type of energy. And you'll often see this, right? The modality by which we don't right? The modality by which we don't when we care about things, we don't energetically twist upon them, right? But the space by which this energy has often had to go through experiences by which they themselves have had to carry trauma in relationality to energy that tries to twist things, right? And this is what I keep on getting with it. That often, like often that modality of being able to effectively identify or recognize, like I see a lot of that. I feel like I see a lot of that energy, like even that, like even that feeling of energetically stretching. And I always like to point this out, like the limitation, the difference between kindness and weakness is the proportionality by which we articulate, like the space by which we hold presence for each other, right? And what do we mean by we hold presence for one another? When we hold presence for one another, then we effectively amplify and articulate the fact that our presence is is an energetic gift, right? It's the modality by which we identify that. And so the work that we see that we do upon that, and I feel like that's what's happening for a lot of these relationships is they're getting much better at building into the power of presence. And what do we mean by the power of presence? Because it's the observation that when you're doing everything you energetically can, right? And another person says, "Why can't you do more?" Often the answer is because of that. Like, because of that, what I like to present to you, exhibit. What I like to present to you, right? Because it's the observation, right? It's the observation of being energetically respective, right? It's the observation of being energetically respective, not building into correctiveness, right? So it's the work that we do that effectively articulates and amplifies that. So I feel like there's something really important for some of the energy like, in those modalities because I feel like they're finding their capacity for things in the best way possible, right? And the capacity I see that they're bringing into circumstances or situations has to do, right, with situations and circumstances of that nature, right? It's a lot of that. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of that context of it's a lot of that context of profound, deep understanding and experience, but also the exploration of that, right? It builds into that profoundness. Now continuing to move back towards the energy in solitude, clarification between the 9 of Pentacles in its reversal with the King of Cups in its reversal. Can I get one card to clarify, please? Clarification coming through right now with the 5 of Swords in its reversal. And so what are we seeing with that 5 of Swords energy in its reversal? The 5 of Swords energy in its reversal um, talks to us about the observation of I keep on saying a lot of this energy right now is building into relationship via looking back at the past. And I like this because this is the energy that's very eager to talk about it. But they're talking about it in a healthy way, right? And what is the difference? How do you hold the past correctly? You talk about it, but you don't long for it, right? That you talk about it respectively. You hold it, right? You hold it energetically sacred. Sacredly, but not longing, right? Sacred but not longing. And why do we see sacred but not longing? Because sacred but not longing is building into the context of the present, which is looking at something, like looking at one's journey sacredly, but not having a desire to return back to something. Because it's the observation of the energy that is staying very, I keep on hearing that's building into the context that the present is a gift, right? There's a lot of that observation that we see. So I feel like that's a lot of the energy that is, I keep on seeing getting very good at anchoring. They're improving upon their ability to anchor into the present. And that is the greatest gift that we can give to the present. Because when we're heavily anchored in the present, right? We're not longing for the past and we're not overbuilding into the future, but we're just being very energetically present in relationality to what it is that we're trying to do at this moment. So we've got a lot of that energy that's working through that right now. And I see that there's a lot of that proportionality there, but the proportionality that we're observing is the energy that is finding, right? Like they're finding their energetic stable, like they're finding their stability, right? And I think that that's really important because I just keep on seeing that some of this energy in solitude are healing. Like I don't know why, but I keep on getting like some of these relationships. I keep on hearing some relationships, some energy is addicted to longing. And I need to point this out. This is how this energy is entering it, right? They're saying longing-free relationship, which is saying like not and we're gonna get into okay, we're gonna get into this now, okay? Because it now there's an alignment point that's happening between the energy in solitude and the energy deep within divine union. Clarification between King of Cups and its reversal with that 9 of Swords and its upright. Yeah, there's that 4 of, pentacles, right? You gotta be very wary of here's the thing about it, um, longing I keep wondering, longing for things isn't doing things. Like, that's what I keep on hearing. Longing for things isn't doing things. And I want you to realize this is why. Okay, and this is okay, so okay, this is so tangled up, but let me walk you through this. There's some energy right now. Like I feel like I see some energy remember when I said some energy that is coming into relationship that's realizing and recognizing that they're healing by having a relationship by which another person holds their purpose with the same sense of, with the same sense of respect as they hold their own, because there's, like, the space by which, and this is why this energy was so long to come into relationship, right? Because I almost see somebody that almost, like, was working through partnership by someone saying, like, "I long to be with you," and someone saying, like, "No, you don't." Right? Like, someone being like, "No, you don't." Right? Because they're holding their purpose being like, "No, you don't." You see, like, you see the energetic ideal of what you believe. Like, you're in the fantasy of looking at what this purpose is rather than what it takes, right? And having experienced wounds before, right? And the observation of a relationship by which another person comes in and articulates the fact that they're energetically respective, but then they can't navigate the space of being within it. And so that's the modality by which the energy has gotten very, like, I feel like they've gotten very used to, right? Working through the point by which they move away from things. And that's why I see that for a lot of these moon relationships, what's happening right now that feels extremely profound and beautiful is the observation of finding something by which they're able to flourish more, right? They're like they're holding each other in a way that feels energetically respective and receptive. And even in the modality by which they're doing that, right? They're finding those possibilities, and those possibilities are creating points of energetic expansion. But even in the modality by which they're experiencing those points of expansion, I keep on seeing there's a lot of feelings that are coming up as it relates to the past by which they they're working towards the fact that the longing never stopped, right? Like, they were in a relationship with another, but it felt like the longing never stopped because it's almost like the energy that said, first they effectively longed for me, and then they effectively longed for me to move away from my purpose, moving closer towards them. And that's the modality by which it says, like, when we're in integrated relationships, we accept the whole of a person. We don't try to separate out between we don't try to find the space between their purpose and the person, right? They're one and the same. So that's why I feel like that's a lot of the energy that feels like they're integrating more because they're finally in a relationship by which they feel they can do that. But there's a lot of wounds that are coming up by which it feels like they were in relationship with someone being like, "You're perfect except for that purpose. Let's see if we can just separate you away from that." Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like the energy that, like, feels that feeling, and even in the modality by which they feel it, like, they're beginning to heal it, but it hurts because they can see it more now. Final card for today's spread, and this is for the energy deep within divine union. 5 of wands in its reverse, swords in its reversal, in combination with that 4 of pentacles in its upright. We've got the Page of Wands in its upright. This Page of Wands has been coming up a lot, and I feel like the thing with the Page of Wands that we're seeing here, and I need to point this out, I feel like there's something, I feel like there's something really important that's happening for a lot of that energy deep within divine union, and I don't know why, but it's like, um, it's how do I describe this? It's working through like, it's where I keep on hearing it's like it's a lot the thing I keep on describing this as is ready and steady, right? Like, that's the thing about it. And the thing is, like, when you're ready and steady, it's not the space by which you long to be. It's something that you find within the self, right? And I like to describe, like, especially what we've got right now is, like, particularly when we have, like, Venus in Aries next to Saturn and Neptune, ready and steady is effectively the identification point that we work through in terms of being able to identify how we feel, right? But also not becoming, I know this is going to sound a little different, not becoming too enamored with the way we feel, if that makes sense, right? Not becoming too enamored with the way we feel, because the thing is, everything, like, and I need to point this out, everything is addictive. Okay? Like, everything is addictive, and you can also be addicted to feelings. Okay? You can also be right? You can also be addictive to feelings, and when we think about it in that way, then when we identify ready and steady, we understand that our feelings, right? Our feelings move through us, and we remain within them, right? We observe the feelings. We don't become. We are not, right? And this is what's important about it. We are the stewards of the things that we feel, right? When we think about that, then when we think about, right, the words that we need to navigate, especially with energy like this, is healthy stewardship, right? And what does it mean by healthy stewardship? Which is the modality by which we effectively feel the things we do. And then we find the ability to be strong in those feelings. And that's not something that we do for ourselves. That is the gift that we give to each other at every single moment, right? At every single moment, we find the ability to be that steadying force, because what is more beautiful in the shape of love than to create that steadiness for each other, right? And that feeling of steadiness, when we think about love as an act of steadying, then we see that as the greatest gift that we can give to every situation, right? To our relationships, to our professions, to everything that we care about, right? Because that becomes the work that we do, and it's not easy, right? The emotions sometimes feel like they get in the way of that. The situations around us feel like they get in the way of that. And I feel like that's what I'm not surprised to see that coming through with a lot of those temperance relationships, because that is the work that I see that they're doing for one another, and not just for themselves, but for everyone around the self. But even in the modality by which they're doing that, they're articulating, right? And this is the hard part about it. You will literally be navigating the situations, doing everything you can to be a steadying force. And then the modality by which you're working to be a steadying force, another person says, you know, what why can't you do more? Right? Like, right? The observation of putting that effort in, right? The space by which it's energetically observable, right? Is often like that's sometimes the moment where like I'm okay. Okay. Right? It's like it's building into, right? And like that's literally like I can just see the energy going like, so it's just sometimes like you can't, this is what we talk about, you can't, like sometimes you can't, like when you see that you just go okay. Like what else are you gonna say? What else? As, like it's a, hold on. Right? Like it's like it's that, because right, there's a word for that, right? Which is like it's the observation of being able to identify bottom of the deck, yeah, there it is, right? The nine of wands, the nine of wands in its reversal, right? And I like to point this out, the I keep on hearing the difference between empowering and giving more power to things, right? The difference between empowering and giving more power to things, which is often, and you'll often like you'll like, this is what happens, right? What does the ego say? And this is what we have to be very conscientious about. The ego says, "Give me," right? Like the ego always wants to say, "Gimme, gimme, gimme." And when we recognize that quality and tendency, we immediately start to heal the ego, right? Because we can't be in a constant feeling that something is always missing, right? Because when you're going through, right, what is when you're going through the feeling that something is always missing, then that is articulated or expressed outside of the self as perpetual neediness, right? It's like that's how others experience it. So you'll go around through your experience being like something missing, and everybody else is experiencing that as neediness. But when we answer the call, right? When we stop looking around to ourselves and saying, "Oh, what's missing? Oh, here I am. Here I am." Right? When we don't look at that and go, "What's missing?" and say, "What do I need to bring to this situation?" Right? What do I need to do? Right? How can we make this better? Then we understand that attenuation point is there so that we answer the call towards it, right? We don't follow the neediness by the nose. We pay attention to what it's asking for, right? Because that is the sound of us working in collaboration with the universe that says, "Hey, I could use your help with this." I could use your help right? Right? Instead of being like, instead of looking around being like, where's the neediness go? Right? It's the space by which we allow it to grow. So if you're feeling like that right now, like I want you to kind of work through that, right? Don't become obsessed with what's missing, become enamored with what could arrive through the presence of the self at every moment. That is our daily collective read for today. I want to thank you guys so much for being here and experiencing it. Just a reminder, if you would like to book a private reading with me, please keep in mind it's a two-step process. You have to book the reading, you have to pay for the reading. Please make sure you do both if you'd like to have that reading. Most importantly, please remember that I will never, ever, 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 ever reach out to you for a private reading. I will never DM you. I will never PM you. I will never slide into your inbox and tell you that I have a very important message that only I can deliver. The only way you can book a private reading with me is if you book one on my site. So I would encourage you to do it there. A couple of updates before we move into personal readings today. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who participated in our recent class on the court cards in the court card sorry the court cards in the Sword Suite. Our next class will be held on Thursday, March 19th at 6 p.m. PST, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be continuing our studies into the tarot with a study on the court cards in the Cup Suite. If you'd like to become part of that tarot class program, all you need to do is head on over to my stack and become a paid subscriber. Your paid subscription to my stack is your ticket of entry into our live classes each and every month. As a paid subscriber, monthly subscriber to my stack, you will have access to over 9 hours worth of material in the Tarot Church Library class archive. Now, it's not necessary to catch up. I'll do my best to give you an update on everything we've studied prior to beginning the next class, but the material is there for you to receive as you're ready to receive it. You'll also have access to a complimentary you'll also have access to a one-on-one chat with me and the other students to ask any questions that you may have in relation to anything we've learned and studied thus far. And if you become a founding member, not only will you receive a discount on the full year's worth of classes, but you'll also receive a complimentary one-on-one mentorship class with me where I will meet with you personally to assess where you are on your own personal tarot journey and give you the best insights in terms of how to utilize those classes to the best of your advantage moving towards your tarot goals going forward. One of the things I try to do about with these classes is make them accessible to the absolute novice tarot reader as well as the seasoned reader. There's definitely something there for everyone. Don't let your lack of experience or your robust experience prevent you from joining us in these classes. And even if you don't become a paid subscriber to my stack, I would encourage you to follow me there to stay up to date on any new offerings or services. I also post my weekly newsletter there, which give you updates on everything we've been seeing energetically in the cards, as as well as my mystic meditation articles, which give you updates on what we've been seeing in the lunation cycles. I just wrote one recently on this full moon that we navigated. I also want to let you guys know that on top of my standard life path readings, I also offer mentorship classes. These are for any of my students seeking a more personalized educational experience with me. I take a very limited number of students for this reason, as those classes are focused on each individual's personal spiritual goals and journey work. Those classes can be purchased on an individual level or as a monthly class series, weekly or biweekly, as your schedule permits. Also, for my students that are seeking more consistent weekly tarot support, I'm very happy to offer weekly tarot insight packages. That is a package of 4 30-minute readings, again, weekly or biweekly, as your schedule permits, so that you can stay more consistent on your personal journey. I'm also very happy to offer dream interpretation readings, which can be purchased per dream or as a series. If you purchase a series, I would encourage you to start to keep a dream journal, as we will meet weekly or biweekly with that journal and utilize the tarot to understand the key themes and messages coming towards you in the dream space. I want to thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing in these messages, and we will do this again tomorrow.